Well, this latest webinar from the Open Group. We've had quite a few over the last few weeks, so I hope this one will be equally as enjoyable as the one. The speaker is Niels Das. I'm looking forward to his presentation today. Before I go over to Niels, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping points to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, in regards to questions, and this is a really good opportunity to ask questions of our speakers. If you would like to submit a question to Niels, then probably the best way of doing that is to write your question in the text queue facility. You do write a question in there. Can I ask you to address it to all participants? That way I can get to see the questions that are being submitted. Our intention is to try and answer as many questions at the end of the presentation, but I'm sure as usual, if we run out of time, then Niels would be more than happy to take any questions offline at a later date. If you'd like to make a general comment, or if you'd like to have a discussion with a fellow attendee, then probably the best facility used is the text chat facility. This event is also being fully recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early, or you experience any local technical difficulties, and I know sometimes we do experience some audio issues in various parts of the world, then a full recording of this event will be available from tomorrow. And then it's registered for today's webinar, you get an email with the appropriate link where they can access that recording. So Niels, if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Thank you much for the opportunity to speak here. And I'll start my presentation by telling a simple story. It may be considered as a fictional story. So a couple of years back, me and a few friends of mine decided to start a business. We identified that there was nobody else providing a certain service through a certain product, so we decided that we would build that product and provide that service. Organization, we were a couple of friends writing code through the night and working the day, and we built a product and we started serving the market. Now, what happened is, initially, the organization was small, and we didn't have any enterprise architecture organization in which I'm in, obviously, because everything was very simple. That does not mean that we did not have an enterprise architecture, just that we had the enterprise architecture in our heads. So, we knew our business, we knew who our customers were, we knew what market segments we're operating in, we knew what the various business policies are, who the stakeholders are, what the licensing mechanism is, and so on and so forth. The various applications that we are going to be working with, we knew the data that we are going to be handling, so the applications, what data they are handling. We also understood the technology that we were using. So that's architecture that we had in our heads. And easy to keep it in our heads initially because the organization was small. But over a period of time, we that there is no sound. Simon, could you check? I mean, are you able to hear me? My test is working fine.
Continue. As I said, we do occasionally get some local technical difficulties. I can hear you fine, and many other people can, so please just carry on.
All right, thank you very much. So, as the organization started growing and the various market segments started spreading, we had to hire more people, hire more leaders within the organization who started making tactical decisions in their location. Why good? Organic growth brings its own challenges. These decisions were not taken, keeping in account the other tactical decisions that are being taken in other places. So we started spending a lot of money in just synchronizing the local decisions globally. And that is the subject of my speech today. Is we solve the problem of all local decisions that are taken so that we get more strategic. My name is Niels Das. You may call me Neil. I'm an architect, I'm a speaker, and I'm a writer. And Simply Learn is a leading global training provider, have trained over 1,000 participants, and they are a leading force in TOGAF certification training. Simply Learn has a multimode trainings ranging from instructor-led classrooms to live classes to self-learning modes. It has a very strong network of the best trainers across the globe for of industry and certification-oriented courses to ensure that the trainees are on top of both the practical know-how as well as the certification requirements. Right, the agenda. So first look at the change that we are seeing these days, the all-pervasive change. We'll look at how we need innovation and innovation plays in our business, what role agility plays in the whole mix. We'll look at what architecture plays for innovation and agility, and then we'll look at the role of TOGAF, and finally we'll look at the role of heroes and what role heroes play in the mix. And finally we'll open it up for questions. When we talk about change, the first book that I usually recommend is Alvin Toffler, called Future Shock, and written another book called The Third Wave. In the book Third Wave, he talks about 3 waves of change that humankind has seen. So, humankind were hunters and gatherers, and then agriculture was the first wave that humankind saw. When agriculture came, it transformed the entire world drastically. Humankind was not the same as it was before. Previously, we were nomadic. Helped us settle down. The change that humankind saw was industrialization. This again changed the entire world and deeply converted us. Right. So what you see on the slide is 2 scenarios. On the left, you see a factory where factory workers are sitting down on a desk, and they are assembling widgets. What the widgets are is not important. And on the right-hand side, you see a classroom of students. There is in this, and this resemblance is incidental. During the era, we realized that people have to be trained so they can quickly fit into the industries that are growing. This was a necessity. And so the educational system was designed in a way that it resembles the factory environment. So a bell in the school and a siren in the factory. So you have to come on time and you would have to go on time. There would be a supervisor or a teacher who would tell you what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and you must obey. This was education that was given to the children in the industrial era. But then, and this is the third wave that Alvin Toffler talks about, this is the super industry era. We hire people who do mundane tasks these days, not using their brains anymore. We hire people, we require thought leaders, we require linchpins. We require people who do more than assemble with. A typewriter. This typewriter that went into commercial production in the 1875. This was during the industrial era. A typewriter. This was invented in the year 1570s. Okay, I'm not entirely sure which year, but it was in the 1570s. Now, in 300 years, it took a typewriter to be invented, and then a typewriter going into commercial production. So there's the research. Is Steve Jobs introducing his first iPhone in the year 2007. The iPhone went into design in the year 2004. So just years of design and it went into commercial production. Understand that the time changed. I mean, in the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, we were busy waging wars with each other, and innovation and industry and going into commercial production, and all these were not really our objectives. But that's the whole point. Changed. We're continuously changing at an accelerated pace. We can't take too much time to get into commercial production, and it has become of more and more importance. The only way forward. The time when people used to buy products, then television came, and then media came, and then internet came, and devices came, and today we are bombarded with information about products and services from all directions. What it has done is it has reduced the attention span of the consumers in the day. The organizations have to now focus towards the of the consumers. There's a book again by Seth Godin called The Purple Cow, where he talks about, if you're driving in France and you see a cow, it's a beautiful scene, and it captures your attention for a while, but it's a very boring scene. You get bored and you don't look at it anymore, and look at it only when you see a purple cow. So consumers have become like that these days. They only stuff that captures their attention span is using. So organizations must do more and more to keep the attention of their consumers. They must be more innovative and process their manufacturing demands these days. Think about it. Is a credit card really necessary? We use the credit card all the time as a manufactured demand. But we depend on a bolt from the blue for innovation or innovative ideas. We must mass produce innovation. Here is a xenomorph. I've taken this from the Aliens movie, and one of the most powerful features about this being was its evolution capabilities. So depending upon in which plant breeds, it would change its physical characteristics to adapt to that environment. And that is one of the biggest powers that any organization can have today in our changing landscape. Innovation is large and disruptive change. All changes that we do every day for continuous improvement cannot be considered as innovation. That is business as usual, that is continuous improvement. It is large and disruptive change that transforms the organization into something completely different. It is the ability of dealing with and responding to change. Innovation requires agility. With an external idea that could change your organization. Is it ready for that change? Is your organization agile enough for that change? And then more and more innovative as time goes by. What by agility? How do you say that an organization is agile? An organization is agile when risks of change are less. What is risk? Risk is the unknown. If there is a change and you don't know that change, how that change is going to impact your enterprise, then so that you know about your organization of change. Of the enterprise helps us study the impact of change and impact of how it's going to transform your organization if you respond to that change. And the enterprise fosters enterprise agility because now you are ready. Now you're ready to respond to large and disruptive changes. When you're ready to change, you're ready for innovation. Enterprise is the architecture of the enterprise. It is architecture, which basically means it gives you a blueprint of what your enterprise looks like, which means when you need to respond to change, you know exactly what is going to be impacted. Architecture this way fosters agility. Let's take all this is all theory. We've heard about this a little bit. Let's take an example. Okay, what is TOGAF? So TOGAF focuses on business architecture. Okay, business architecture is studying the business, studying the processes that you in your organization, understanding the goals and objectives of the organization, understanding who the stakeholders are, what the business processes are, what are the various functions, how the various departments of the business function align with each other, communicate with each other, and how everything changes over a period of time. On what principles, on what rules do we decide that we will change? TOGAF says information systems architecture is based on your business architecture. Its sheer existence is to support the business architecture. And technology architecture exists only to support the information systems architecture. So enterprise architecture as a whole completely depends on the architecture. Like the story that I told you at the beginning of this session. Let's say there are so many geographies that we spread into. Okay. And let's say there is a tactical decision that is taken. Instead of a tactical decision being taken locally at a single geography, if the formal enterprise architecture organization, or even formal one for that matter, if informed about the tactical decision, they can provide strategic oversight of the impact of that decision that is being taken, how it would affect the various other geographies, right? And it can provide good, I mean, it helps that local organization to take better, so that they don't have to spend too much money synchronizing those decisions globally. All information system architecture decisions are based on business architecture, on the business objectives goals. Let you guys in which you have so many applications that from various functions. All these applications are talking to each other. What's on the slide is an application communication diagram where these applications are talking to each other. And this is the preliminary phase. What it does is it increases your dependency on these applications. So let's say one of these applications is a COTS application, commercially off the shelf. There are so many applications talking to this application, and since this application is providing information to so many other applications, it increases because you don't know what is going to be the impact of editing one application, replacing it with the other. So we come up with a business vision. The vision is to not have all the applications talk to each other directly and eliminating the dependency from them. You see in the picture here on the right-hand side, is you have the data repositories in the middle. You have a data transport layer with abstracts repository, and all the applications are talking to the data transport layer. If you have to eliminate one application, you know exactly what you need to do. You need to replace that interface with another one. It makes this very simple because they're very simple. It's easy to implement. So it gives you a step-by-step approach to go from the first stage, which are all the applications talking to each other and having a very high dependency on application vendor, which is clean and so what you do is in the architectural vision phase, you need to do. So in the very phase, you prepare for your goals and objectives set up. And then the architecture vision phase, you come up with one vision. This is your first step in enterprise architecture. In business architecture phase, so we have set up architecture vision, you know exactly where you want to go, what strategy is. Example is just one example. This vision could be what is an IT vision. It could well be a business vision like you have a merger with another organization, or you've decided that you are going to divide the departments in your organization and sell it off to another organization. Now, this is a huge transformational change which is going to have impact across your business landscape. So business architecture allows you to understand what are the transformations that you'll have to go to. How are stakeholders impacted? How are your goals and objectives going to be affected? What is the strategy? You know, what are the business processes that are going to be impacted? Some of the business processes you are going to let go. So new business processes are to have to be created. Some between various business functions are going to change. Some business services are going to change. What is the impact on the finances? What is the impact on various other stakeholders, extended stakeholders? So that is what you study in your business function piece. Comes information systems architecture. Okay. So once you understood what is functions and what are your business objectives that are going to change, you know what the gaps are, right? At a point in time, you have certain business functions, business process services, stakeholders, etc. So you have a future state now. In the future state, you have missing, which were there previously, or you have some new business processes and services, some new stakeholders which did not exist before. So some of the components that did not exist are added to the state, and some of the components which were there in the current state do not exist in the future state. That change, you break it down into smaller components, and these components that change, you design your information systems architecture. Let's add a couple of business processes and services, applications that you are going to need to solve these new business processes. Who are stakeholders? And data requirements that these new stakeholders have. This is the main job of information systems architecture. It supports the business architecture. It ensures that the business architecture meets its goals and objectives. When you design your information systems architecture toward the target business architecture, what you are essentially doing is designing your target information systems architecture. Information systems architecture as well. You have some applications which already support the existing business architecture. You have some data that you're managing, which is needed by the business stakeholders at this point in time. So you have a current architecture and you have a future architecture. You compare this and perform a gap analysis. And you come up with components that are going to change. Obviously, again, some components are going to have to be added to your architecture so that you can achieve your target state. And components are going to have to be eliminated. These are your candidate components. These are the components that you're going to have to change over a period of time. So now you have some candidate components in the business architecture and some candidate components in the information systems architecture. Thinking about architecture. Technology architecture is about hardware, software, and networking infrastructure. Your technology, your hardware, your operating systems, your balancers, your networking infrastructure, how is it going to support the applications that are going to be needed for the objectives of the organization? Right? When you design your technology architecture to support your future state application and data architecture, you're again designing your technology architecture for the future state. Now, you currently already have a technology architecture which supports your current application and business architecture. So, you have architecture within technology architecture. One is the as is or the current state, and one is the future state. When you compare these, you find again some components, some new operating systems, infrastructure software, some new hardware, networking infrastructure, which you are going to have to add to your existing technology architecture. You have to eliminate some of the outdated technology, right? Give you the gaps in your existing state and your state. There are opportunities and solutions. So until now, you've done all your requirements gathering. You've understood what your business is. But your business architecture has been the platform until now, based on which you've designed your enterprise architecture. You need to, so you have requirements, you have your business requirements, your application and data requirements, you have your technology requirements. Planning. So it is the example that we took before. Let's say you wanted to go from from all the applications communicating with each other to having a data transport layer and applications talking to the data transport layer so that you can eliminate application vendor dependency. Okay. At a point in time, you will have to consolidate all your requirements. You will have to consolidate your business requirements where you talk about why you are doing this, what your goals and objectives are. You will have to consolidate all the business components of it. What are the processes, functions that are going to be impacted because of adding a data transport layer? You will consolidate the components that you came up with for application data, where it would be something like what are the various databases that are going to be eliminated, what are the new databases that are going to be, are there any commercially off-the-shelf software applications that we are going to buy or build or outsource or what have you, are any applications we are going to eliminate, what are new technologies that we are going to bring in, what are the old technologies that we are going to decommission, and so on. We validate all of these changes. We understand a high-level view of how we are going to achieve our target state. Now, all these components that we have come up with are really small components which need to be consolidated together. And this consolidation happens because all these components have dependencies on each other. Not that, the business is going to have some priority. We need to prioritize these components as what they want first and what they want later. So this picture that we saw in the vision slide looks very simple. Not all the applications are going to be required upfront, and you are not going to be able to deliver all the applications together. So you decide which are the applications that you are going to separate from the mix right now and point them towards the data transport layer. You are going to have to build the data transport layer first. So there is some level of prioritization that needs to be done. Prioritization must take into account the dependencies that each application has on each other. This is done in this phase. Operation planning. So last phase, we looked at a high-level planning of what we're going to be doing. We consolidate the components that we came up with for going from the current state to the future state. We looked at how we can put them into work packages. We can, depending upon what dependencies they have on each other. And we looked at what stakeholder requirements are and how they would like to prioritize these high-level components. But for an enterprise architecture organization with enterprise, you're not the only entity that exists. There are entities as well. Now, enterprise really is made up of so many different capabilities. There are lines of business. If you're a financial services organization, for example, then the various lines of businesses in a financial services organization. There would be equities. There would be fixed income type lines of businesses. There would be accounts, there would be finance, there would be marketing, what have you, right? If you're a pharmaceutical and healthcare organization, then you would have, oncology, you would have orthopedics, you have pediatrics, and what have you. So all these capabilities are really lines of business. They have their business to run and have IT supporting them as well. So the team really, what they do, you're usually, I'm not saying organization has this, but usually what happens is IT organizations some lines of businesses by conducting projects. These projects are based on business requirements. Now, in situations, not that go to enterprise architecture. And I'm talking specifically about business innovation, all right? So the lines of businesses are giving projects to the IT department, and the PMO has its annual plans as well. So the enterprise architecture organization now needs to work with the PMO teams, not just in this phase, but in the previous phase as well. The enterprise architecture projects that they come up with, the PM projects. The PM is already conducting projects for the lines of business. And all the enterprise architecture projects are going to go through. So, for example, in our particular case, let me align 5 projects with the data transport layer. Now, each application can be conducted as a project or can be treated as a project. Now, talking to the PMO says we have 3 projects already. We have space for 3 more. We can only run 6 projects, and 3 projects are absolutely high priority. Rest of the projects is next year. 3 projects. Now, this is a very simplistic example. Obviously, there is going to be project sizing, and depending upon how much complexity there is in each project and how much time it will take to execute each project at a very low prioritization is going to be done. But what I'm trying to say here is that architecture team will now have to sit down with the PMO team or the teams and try these projects and do detailed planning. Projects. How much time is it going to take to run these projects? When is the project to start? What are dependencies? The risk associated with these projects. How much is it going to take? How much cost is it going to be? So we were doing the phases A, B, C, and D, and even actually certain extent, but let's count till D. At a blue sky vision, an aspirational vision of what we want to do. We did not consider the challenges and cost factors, and wherever we did consider a very high level cost factor, but mostly it was an aspirational vision of what the enterprise wants to be in the future. It's only in the E and F phases that take into account the practicalities of execution of these projects. And the reason for that, when the architecture team starts taking practical cost and challenges into account when they are building their architecture, they would be able to build an aspirational vision. And it's very important that the architects build an aspirational vision of the enterprise. But it is that we take into account the challenges that come with the execution of these projects. And that's why we have the phases E and F. So phase, we take account all these challenges and we prioritize our enterprise architecture projects with the PMO project and how many of these projects can get executed. Planning done. So if you're doing agile, then you rate your release plans and your sprint plans in this phase. If you're doing fall, then you would create your Gantt charts in this phase. A TOGAF framework aligns with all the other management frameworks there is. So the alignment happens here. In fact, after the phase F, your architecture projects become a part of another project plan. It may go into the PMO team. And that happens. The plan make projects of your team. And this is an example that I'm giving you. This is not necessarily always the organizational structure. Depending on organization to organization, the organizational structure changes. Phase implementation governance happens. A couple things about the implementation governance phase. The PMO teams are executing your projects. In the phases A, observation phase, we create standards, best practices, and principles. These best practices need to be followed by the enterprise. With governance phase, we provide architectural oversight. We provide governance over execution. We make sure that the projects that are being executed by the PMO team are being executed quickly. Now, heard about the concept of the ivory tower, right? Architects are sitting on tall, expensive ivory tower, standards and best practices of project teams, not knowing what's happening down there, whether those standards and best practices are really practical or make sense. That implementation governance phase is not executed properly. Architects mustn't just create standards and best practices, they must constantly analyze practices are practical. And the only way that happens is through milestone reviews. Many organizations, this done really well. Okay. Projects are reviewed at various lifecycle events. Lifecycle events like You had your going into design phase, the project viewed, and see the design is how well designed is meeting the best practices and the standards or not. And now going into the development phase, we see whether the design, after the design completes done, we see when is pragmatic and meeting the standards or not. And then after development, we ensure, we just talk to the project manager at a very high level if there were any challenges that have been met or not, that we have seen implementing those standards and best practices. And QA, and then there are also other things which can be done during the stone reviews, like if you have a reusable component library in your enterprise and you want to encourage the teams to use that or reach that further, then stone reviews could provide you an opportunity to have a dialogue with the project manager and the technical architect of that team of the components, and about if there are any components that can be put back into the library and so on. And there are so many other things you can do using these stone reviews during implementation governance phase. So learning experience, not just for the projects, but for the enterprise architecture teams. Because when you're having these milestone reviews, various projects, it gives the project managers an opportunity to talk to you about challenges that they face in implementing those standards that exist in the industry today about implementation governance. All right. Some organizations are very active. So these organizations, the enterprise architecture team, mandate that the project teams implement the standards that have been set up. In organizations, there is more design model. These organizations provide an architecture assurance service. Projects are disapproved, and the best practices and standards that are being set up by the architecture team are recommendations, really. So all they have to do is, if they do not want to follow a certain best practice or standard, they have to take a deviation and provide a justification. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. It has an advantage that there is better standardization, quicker adoption, quicker adaptation, as they see fit. Authoritarian enterprise architecture structure has advantages. The advantages are that enterprise architects have to be extremely cautious of standards that they are setting. These become impractical real soon. If they are cognizant about it, over time, enterprise architecture initiative could fail altogether. Or there is the buy-in model. The disadvantage that you have in the buy-in model is that there will be many projects that will take deviation and to record the deviation. Is achieved in a buy-in model is that over a period of time, you keep presenting reports about how many projects have taken a deviation to the senior management, and show impact that it had on the enterprise architecture. Senior management understands that too many deviations are not good, and the value that it accrues is slower when you have too many exceptions. So the senior management takes it up with themselves, making sure that the deviations are reduced. The board meeting that usually should happen, where there is a formal enterprise architecture organization, and the report about any deviations have been taken should be produced in the board meeting. So the board understands and ensures that going forward, the deviations reduce. One more model, the advantage is that the project teams that are executing the standards get an opportunity to talk to to the architecture organization, and during their business justification, speak up and say that these standards are not relevant to their projects, which makes the enterprise architecture organization itself more agile and ensures that the standards and best practices are more relevant. Implementation governance phase is important, not just for the enterprise, but also for the enterprise architecture organization in implementing the standards and in make sure that project teams the standards that are that be met by the to be met. Also, change management. Enterprise team exists because we need change, right? Small is across the enterprise cause costs to rise up. Because let's say in these geographies there are various applications that are being used for the same business function. It means you are spending money on multiple applications to do the same thing, which could have been leveraged. It all means that now you have, if you have to make them talk to each other, you will have vision problems because these applications were not originally designed to talk to each other, which means extra expenditure. This enterprise architecture, which was applications talking to a data transport layer. You build your business architecture, understanding the impact on the business processes, functions, and services, and stakeholders, and goals and objectives. You did your application and data architecture to support the new business services, new business functions. You did your technology architecture, which would support your new applications or eliminated applications, and so on. And you did high-level planning, detailed planning. You provided architectural overview. It takes time. Okay, it doesn't happen overnight. While all this has been happening, do not come to a standstill. The world did not wait for you to change so that it could further change. The world might have changed. Why we require enterprise architecture team in the first place? Because we want to respond to change. Like I said, change is happening at an accelerated rate. So change management allows you or other stakeholders to change their mind. Let's say something, they did something, today they don't want it anymore. Then change management would allow you to, let's say in our particular example, there were a couple of applications that we decided that we wanted, okay, because we wanted to decommission some of the old applications which we were keeping simply because we were dependent on them. Now dependency is eliminated, we don't need to keep them. So we decided that we would have a couple of applications to perform certain business functions, and we were implementing all these changes. We made those applications, and something new has come which we want to leverage. Change to decide what you want to do with the change required. Change, a very small change that does not impact stakeholders. And you can go ahead and implement change right away. From back to one of the phases, like for example, let's say you want to change the technology somewhere. Okay, previously you decided that you would have on-premise servers. Now you decided that you want to go with infrastructure as a service. So you back to technology architecture. Make the change. Go back to even solutions. Package, migration planning, plan, implementing governance, execute it, and over. It's a large change which is going to change some of the business processes entirely. You don't want to do it in this iteration at all. It's a new request for architecture work. You create a new requirement, decide that you do it in the next. What I'm trying to tell you here is TOGAF framework is an enterprise architecture framework, focuses on business architecture. It allows your enterprise to change over a period of time depending upon your business goals and objectives, depending upon your strategies for the future. It changes the IT architecture so for the business better. And business architecture is the core of architecture and of the TOGAF framework. It is all about change. The last topic that I want to bring here is who are extremely talented and who innovative ideas in your organization. And there are the people who lead change, who change your organization and transform your organization. Fantastic, when you think that, for example, single-handedly created the behemoth called Microsoft, or Steve Jobs created an organization like Apple. But true fantastic as you think. Gates did not do it alone. Jobs did not do it alone. He had help. You depend on one person to change your organization because that hero leaves you. You can't afford hero in your organization. What you really need is a process that fosters innovation and enables you to change adapt to those innovations. The end of my session, and with that, I would like to open it up for questions.
Much a very interesting presentation. Don't have a great deal of questions, but I'll work through what we do have. First, we have had a number of requests for the availability of slides. Have you given any thought to making your slides available to attendees?
I'm available. I'm not entirely sure about the logistics of how that can be done. Simon, you'll have to help me out with that.
Okay, what I would suggest is if anyone would like a copy of your slides, then they will have my email address as the host. So please send me an email, and I'll forward them to Neil, and you can send the presentations out. If that works, okay?
Should be fine.
Okay, good. So we have a question, and this is from Mike, and he asks, how do you envisage maintaining relationships between various levels in an enterprise architect? Give an example: strategic, segmental capabilities. Is there a numbering or versioning system, or does it really depend on the individual tools or tool sets used?
Oh, interesting question. There's no versioning system. There's no versioning system that I'm aware of that maintains the relationships between the various levels of an architecture. What the tools definitely allow us. So various tools available that allow us to create strategic architecture and then segmented architecture within those strategic architectures, and then the capability architectures within those segments. What I feel is that it is more a project management activity than it is an enterprise architecture activity. I'm similar to project management activity. I'm not saying that the PMO does it and the team does it, but it is very similar to a PMO activity of cyber enterprise architecture initiatives, based on so if you have a strategic objective and then you want to break it down into smaller segments, break it down is again completely dependent on what kind of capabilities that you want to border them with, and then again capability architecture. So completely depending upon the size of your strategy, the complexity of your strategy, you have to do it. And tooling it provides us to break it down. I hope I answered that question.
Okay, thank you. A question from Dale. Can businesses really afford to do phase A and D without considering cost, resources and schedules, which doesn't address until phases E and F? Goes on, I wonder if this approach leads to the belief of some customers that architecture wastes money.
We are executing any of these projects, by the way. Okay, when we are doing phases A, B, C, and D, only designing. At this point in time, the expenditure is really that much Because, well, there is some expenditure on the tooling that you're going to have to install and stuff like that. But building at this point in time is requirements for the future. Whether those requirements are going to be executed this year or later remains to be seen. And it's what we look at in the phases E and F. I haven't really spent any money until then. Money picture comes in only when we start thinking about executing projects. Okay. So when we are executing projects, at that time we look at the practical requirements and the return of investments and value accrual, which brings up a very interesting subject really. So when integration planning, implementation governance, at that point in time, the enterprise architects show the value that they have accrued for the organization to the stakeholders, right? And the real expenditure in practical scenarios really begins in the phases when they said E and F, we are doing planning for that phase. So gathering requirements doesn't really take a lot, doesn't really incur much expenditure. So yes, it does make practical sense to have a blue skies vision in the phases A to D.
Question from Kirsty. Does TOGAF have a specific task for this capability modeling?
So when you're doing business architecture, that is when you would do business capability modeling, when you're trying to understand what are the various business capabilities that you have. And even in architecture vision phase, you define your scope. When you're defining your scope, at a very high level, you would take into account the various business capabilities that you would consider within enterprise architecture scope. This scoping is done for this version of the ADM. So if I say that we are considering these capabilities for in our scope within this iteration, it does not mean that the enterprise does not have any other capabilities the main scope for this iteration. So yes, with capability modeling is done within the business architecture phase.
I suppose this is the follow-on question, but it's a very common one. This is from Harshita. If we need to define in one crisp sentence the difference between enterprise architecture and business architecture, what would it be?
Mm-hmm. So, is studying only the business, all right? Understanding what are the business processes, what are the business functions, how they are with either who the stakeholders are, what your business goals and objectives are, what your and so on. Okay, your alignment of the business architecture, which is a very, very debatable subject to be very honest. But I'm going to give you the definition from the TOGAF perspective. Enterprise architecture contains within it architecture, application architecture. So here we are looking at the various applications, infrastructure applications that your enterprise uses, how they communicate with each other, communicate with the environment, and how they change. And that contains data architecture, which is the architecture of the information that you need to manage, and information that is being used and passed across the various applications and stakeholders. And finally, technology architecture, which is the hardware, software, and networking infrastructure that your enterprise has. The support application and data architecture. So enterprise architecture really is the study of the entire enterprise. Not just from the business perspective, but also from the application, data, and technology perspective. Mind you, business architecture remains core to architecture. It is always at the center, and everything else is defined around business architecture, but not the only thing. Architecture is not the only thing within enterprise architecture. There are people who think, this TOGAF says, architecture is the management of IT focused to support the business. There are examples in the industry where they say that enterprise architecture is not just about IT, it is about the entire business. So you have a business and no IT department, and you can still have enterprise architecture. There is also a debate that enterprise architecture should not be reporting into IT at all, and it should be probably reporting into some business function. We are not going to go there. So it is completely debatable, but from the TOGAF perspective, business architecture is one component within the within the enterprise architecture. There are three other components: data, application, and technology.
Question here from Peter. The presentation was grounded in supporting agility, one element of which is time to value. The methodical EA assessment you described takes time. How do you go fast enough to support business needs?
Fast enough to support the business needs. So, TOGAF supports so first of all, TOGAF framework is not competing with other management frameworks. It aligns with the other management frameworks. For example, Agile is a software development methodology, but there are a lot of people who say that Agile is really a delivery mechanism. It's not just about software. There is Lean also there, and Kanban and so on, and TOGAF aligns with all of these. So these things provide a faster mechanism of delivering value upfront. Okay? So we're in the implementation governance phase, in the opportunities and solutions phase and the migration planning phase, we decide what is the highest value organization. And this is not the only way. There are other ways. So if your architecture is new, then you may choose the easier challenges and solve them first and show value, and then build your enterprise architecture organization within the enterprise, but that is not the only thing. What you do to provide true value and quick value to the enterprise is use methodologies, prioritize your enterprise architecture goals and objectives in such a way that they start accruing value immediately, and even then. That is one. Second is what we talked about earlier. There are three levels of enterprise architecture. There is strategic level, segmented level, and capability level. And capability levels are really at the smallest level. So when you have a large objective like doing a merger with another organization, with large objective, you break it down into segments and you break it down further into capabilities, and each capability delivers value back to the business. Value is being, accrued in small iterations. So human value is added to the enterprise, making it more and more agile and supple. One, the more time you do enterprise architecture, over a period of time, your organization becomes more and more supple, agile, because you know more about your enterprise. So if you change something, you quickly do an impact analysis, study the impact, and make the change. It's organization risk-free and eventually makes it more and more agile. And iterations become smaller and smaller.
I'm just keeping an eye on the time, but I think we have time for one final question. This is from Atesh, asking, can TOGAF help in coming up with a strong enterprise data governance process, or do architects need to rely on other frameworks for data management processes?
Do not really have the TOGAF work, let me be more specific, does not have direct data governance methodologies within it. It is about the governance. It talks about how data governance can be done at a very high level, but you need to have to depend on other governance methodologies. It provides level governance. It provides recommendations about how governance can be done at a high level. How you adapt the enterprise to a framework to do data governance, but doesn't have specific methodologies for data governance, and you must depend on other data governance frameworks.
Right, well, we've come to the end of our hour, so I think it would be a good time to end the session. Neil, have you got any final words you'd like to share with those attending?
Very quick definition of enterprise architecture. There is a lot of confusion about what enterprise architecture is in the industry. In a job description of an enterprise architect, what you see is really the description of Superman, where the architect is expected to know and do everything. architecture is really the architecture of the enterprise. It is the analogy can be given. An enterprise architecture is enterprise architect is like the advisor to the king. The king are the CIOs and the CEOs. Then enterprise architects provide them with the business intelligence and the information that they need to take strategic decisions to the enterprise over a period of time. So if you're looking for an enterprise architecture position somewhere, make sure that you study the job description properly and understand what enterprise architecture means, more than just technical architecture. That's what I would like to say.
Well, Neil, that's a good way to end. Firstly, I'd like to thank you, Neil, for your time and the presentation today. And I'd like to thank everyone else for joining us on this webinar. And we will all join us again in our future events. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.